My name is Jessup. I'm a career coach for emerging and professional screenwriters. I work with screenwriters of all levels. I started out as a production hand, then a screenwriter myself way back when. Had an early career success, which was actually fantastic because I found out I really didn't want to be a working screenwriter. So from there on, I went to work in development. After that, I ran a small coverage service, from which place writers started approaching me and asking me for career advice. And this is really how I became a career coach over a decade ago. Now I work with, at any one time, between 150 and 175 writers who are both just starting out and all the way to A-list studio writers, showrunners, et cetera, and obviously everything in between. So today we are here for our Becoming a Successful Writer event. And I really wanted to talk about some writing best practices, things that help a writer be successful that I've seen over the years of my doing this, include from the craft, so from script, what stands out, all the way to becoming a emerging and professional working writer, getting that attention that is so incredibly important. Just a little rules of the road for this morning. You guys can certainly put questions up in the Q&A. I will answer them a little bit later on because I want to get on a roll, get you guys the information that I wanted to get you, that I promised to share with you today. I will be drinking tea so that hopefully my throat holds up. And I have a second cup of tea with a cover on it, and some water. So if I pause on occasion, that is why that is happening. But we will plow through the next hour, potentially a little bit, because I tend to go over and I never have enough time. Time is my eternal enemy. I will be offering up a lot of names of things, resources, et cetera. I will send an email at the conclusion of this session to everybody within an hour or two with some of those links, so you don't have to worry about what you wrote right, what you didn't write right. I will make sure that I get that information to you, and we will just keep going from there. All right, so as discussed a minute ago, our title here for the event was Becoming a Successful Writer from Craft to Business. I want to say thank you to everybody who chimed in about what my next event topic should be. That was incredibly helpful to glean some information. I put something together that I hope, while not answering some of those more niche topics, or discussing some of those more niche topics, that we'll be able to discuss something for everybody today, everybody who's here, and you'll be able to get some information out of here that will help you, regardless of where you are in your journey to becoming a successful writer. So for me, a screenwriting career really can't exist, or a TV writing career. When I say screenwriting, I'm really referring to writing for both the big and the small screen. It really can't exist without, first and foremost, having a great script on hand, what we call an undeniable script. The sort of script that gets out there, the people are excited about, the people can't put down, that we find some traction for. It doesn't mean everybody's going to love it. Some people are not, and I'm going to tell you that right now. It is an entirely subjective business. In my screenwriter support group, we just invited Matt Misitich from Script Pipeline to come talk to us, and he spoke about the fact that it's all about sensibility at every level, right? Whether it's starting out in a competition or all the way to studio, right? There are readers in place, there are analysts, there are development executives that are there to kind of identify the material that meets the company mandate, and are hired with that in mind. So somebody recently said to me, how do I get to a higher level reader at, say, a studio, for them to respond better to my script? The reality is that it's not about a higher level reader as much as it is the company making the movies that you're making the TV shows that you're making. But once we know that, we want to really make the script as strong as possible, because scripts require buy-in, right? This is an industry in which, unlike a book that you can write and then go and self-publish and never have approval from another human before it becomes a real live working book, there needs to be buy-in from people, because making a TV show, making a movie are incredibly expensive. Even if a writer is brought in on a script that then lends them an assignment, we're talking about big spends. So what that means is that you need buy-in. You need to make sure that the script is at a high enough level in order to be identified and moved on and have enough people like it. Again, not everybody's going to like it. And I think it's an important thing to remember, but you want to make sure that as you're writing, you're finding enough people that are responding to it and responding to the material. So let's talk about what I look for in material, whether in development, working with a client, or when we're looking towards the industry, and then, ultimately how to make sure that your script is landing as it needs to learn. So for me, the key elements for a successful screenplay or pilot, and they are different animals, so I'm not trying to completely compare them to one another, but there are some things that are consistent. The last event that I had, our last StraightTalk, was with a manager by the name of Jeff Portnoy, who was incredible. And I did record that one and am sharing that. So if you want to link to that Jeff Portnoy conversation, which was a fantastic session that went over an hour, I'm more than happy to share it with you. We got a little clunky as we got going there, but we made it happen. So if you do want to see it, take a look. But what Jeff talked about, Jeff Portnoy is a prominent, very successful manager with a very tall list of clients, many of whom are very successful. What he looks for are effectively 4 things: concept, story development, character, and dialogue. So let's break those things down. Concept really speaks to the idea that is powering your script, right? What is the big idea behind it? What is the thing that sets it aside? Now, there are projects that are higher concept, bigger concept, that the log line alone is incredibly intriguing because it's something new, something same but different, something that feels like an area that the reader, be they a manager, an executive in a non-strike time, or a producer, would like to explore. So some scripts are not concept heavy, right? 2 sisters negotiating their grief at the loss of their mother is not going to be a script that is going to easily attract a lot of eyes, because it feels like a stronger character-driven drama. We're not going to be driven by a particular idea or concept that then becomes easy to talk about. A lot of what managers are looking at when they're examining concept is, can I call my friends in production, my friends on the executive branch, and entice them to read the script based on what this is, right? Based on this particular project, that the concept that's powering it. So oftentimes we find that the higher, bigger, more standout concepts becomes representation bait, becomes a good thing to reel in a good rep with. While other softer concepts may be better for competitions like the Nickel, may be better for producing. It really is very dependent on the material, also dependent on the writer's particular relationships in the industry. I have a bunch of blog posts about concept. I will put them up in the email to you guys, just so you can dig into that a little bit more. Story development really speaks to plot. How are we laying plot? How are we moving that story along in an effective, unexpected, but exciting and earned way? Earned is a big word in development in the industry, and it really speaks to character earning, us being with our character, which brings us to the next thing and what makes that powerful screenplay. Writing those really authentic, dimensional, unique characters that we really feel get to know on the page, or feel that we are getting to know on the page, and then connecting them with a plot that they are earning at every turn. So it's believing the character journey and understanding their choice or choices based on what you laid on the page about them as a character. Are they earning the development of the plot, the development of the story? Lastly, a lot of people do look at dialogue to find that distinctive voice. For a lot of writers, dialogue can stand out. We're always looking for every character to have their unique voice, their unique speech patterns, things that they say, things that they don't say. If you guys are writing and working on scripts and you haven't done so already, you can either go to character mode on Final Draft or do what back in the 90s we used to do when we would just do character passes, right? Where you just read a script all the way down from one character's point of view and just focus on their dialogue so you can really, really hear them. Now, for me, when I read a script, one of the important things beyond those technical things is emotional resonance. I want to feel something. I want to have an experience, to have an emotional experience reading the material. I want to feel something visceral, something that is beyond just a good story, good plotting, but something I don't feel particularly close to. I was talking to a client of mine yesterday who is a big EP, and we're talking about a particular show on Apple that is based on a book, and I will not name names because don't want to ruin it for anybody. But my observation on the material is that it felt very cold, and because of that, I didn't really feel enticed to watch it beyond the first 2 episodes that I watched. Yes, it's intellectually interesting, but I found it to be very cold. We can get away with it more when material is on its feet, but with scripted material, we want to feel something. As a person who reads scripts every day, I want to have an emotional experience. I want to lose kind of sight of the page count of where I am in the story. And I want to really have an emotional experience. And I think it's an important thing for every writer to ask themselves, what do I want my audience, my reader, to feel once they're done with this experience? What do I want them? What is the emotion that I want them to end on or to experience this with? Client of mine went on record, so we know he said this, I assume I can repeat it. Crosby Sealander sold a script in 2020 in a bidding war in a way that really has not happened a lot at all for new emerging writers, and myself and Matt from Script Pipeline, where Crosby was a finalist. We're talking the other night and talking about how it reminded us what is possible in Hollywood, because he did the unthinkable, which is brand new writer to the industry, not very hardworking writer, but to the industry, was effectively a stranger, got plucked out of a finalist run-up in a competition, in the Script Pipeline competition, and sold his script for 7 figures, like a huge deal. The kind of deal that we thought that we had to say goodbye to for new writers, but ultimately proved to us that this can still happen, which is beyond exciting. But if you ask him why he sold the script, how does he think that it happened, that he sold the script to set in a 7-figure deal in a bidding war, he will tell you, and he sold the script to Legendary, and he will tell you, I made Mary Parent, head of the company, cry twice, and that's why she bought my script for a lot of money. And for the record, he's not wrong. The writing is great. The wordsmithing, right? Just the craft of laying down action line was beautiful. The dialogue was great. The characters were amazing. But it's that emotional resonance that ultimately made the sale for him, right? Push the material forward to him to get to a sale. I do think it's really important to think about wordsmithing as well. I can tell you, I read a script earlier this week, a pilot that ultimately, in the end, needed some work. But the crafting of the first few sentences of those action lines, the first page or 2 of the script, really made me sit up. It really made me feel like I was dealing with a writer, even though she was not a working writer. She's a writer who is just starting out, has 2 scripts under her belt, really made me sit up and pay attention, feeling like the writer is working with material they're comfortable with, and that material is words. And she is not over-explaining, is not overwritten, but the way that she is using them is malleable, and she's making it hers, which I love. Now, for me, I always look for an active protagonist in a script. I think that is really where, once you have your concept, you have to figure out how to activate your protagonist, how to give your protagonist a clear goal, a clear stake. And that's going to be true for every storyline in your script, whether it's a pilot or a screenplay. Each storyline, A, B, C, D, E story, is going to be driven by a particular character. And that character is going to drive that story based on wants and needs and what's getting in the way. So how do you make an active protagonist? You figure out, what do they want, what's getting in their way, and what's at stake for them. So for those of you who heard me speak, you're going to hate me for doing this, but I'm going to go to Breaking Bad again because there's just nothing better. But in Breaking Bad, Walt has cancer, right? That is our setup. Walt has cancer, and his family is going to die destitute. He has had a mediocre life. He has failed as, a provider, in the sense that he doesn't have money to leave with his family. He will die a failure as a father and a husband, leaving his family with nothing, and doesn't want that. That creates the drive to go make meth, right? What gets in the way is every legal avenue and every dealer that comes after him. What's at stake in the beginning is really his manhood, right? Not let alone his family and his family's welfare once he is dead, because he believes that death is close. Breaking Bad is the easiest way to explain it, but if you look at most material, you will find a clear goal. Usually there's going to be, in well-written work, we're going to have internal journey, external journey, and internal goal and external goal. They cannot be the same, but one would feed into the other. Then we get into the whole thing that the internal journey is all about the wound that the character brings with them, and our journey is going to make them face fears or face things that they've had a difficulty facing over the years. So there's a lot to get in there in order to really make the material stand out. Now, oftentimes I don't talk to novelists as much anymore, but when I used to talk to novelists more, I would often hear people saying to me, or people who came from the novel world, screenwriting is so much easier than novel writing, so I decided to go for it. I actually find screenwriting to be much more difficult because there are a lot more rules that you have to follow. There are a lot more boxes that you have to check. You have to tell an entirely authentic, original, meaningful, powerful story that is fresh in yours, while checking a lot of boxes, right? Adhering by a lot of rules or making conscious decisions to break them, but with some regard to those rules. So I do think that it's incredibly important to recognize how challenging it is and to become better at your craft. I touched on it very lightly, guys. Like, we can talk about it for the next 3 days and I will not run out, but as we know, clock is my enemy. So I'm going to move this along because I want to talk about continuing to do the things that will help you become successful. So how do we ultimately become better writers, right? And what I'm telling you, for the record, this is not true only for writers that are starting out. Once in a while, I'll do these talks. Somebody will email me and will say, well, some of the stuff was for early stage writers. While early stage writers can certainly benefit from much of this, the reality is that my working writers, for the record, are doing the same thing. They're doing 3 things that are always helping bolster their craft. They're watching, so they identify their lane, they identify what type of writer they want to be, and we'll talk about that a little bit more when we talk about brand. They watch the content in that space. Not only do they watch that content, they listen to podcasts. They're keenly aware of the material whose lane they want to be in. Off the record, yesterday, one of my writers got a call from a big competition organizer that there may or may not be some success in the future for that writer in that competition. And because the writer has been reading a ton of content and watching a ton of content, he could easily speak to this organizer, who's an industry professional, about the type of content that he writes and the other content in that space. So watching content, always know what's in your space. Watch it. It's your responsibility. You're not working in a bubble. I remember I talked to somebody not too long ago who wrote a lovely script about a female poet in the early days of America. And inevitably, we had such same show on Apple. And the writer was aware, but wasn't familiar, didn't watch. You're writing material for an industry that is living, breathing, and at the end of the day, there are business decisions to be made, right? So if ultimately you are writing a show about Mick Jagger, or a fictional Mick Jagger, and then there's a similar show that goes forward, it's up to you to watch it. Whatever your subject matter and whatever your genre space, you want to be aware of the other content. It'll also help you become a better writer, for the record. If you're writing in a particular space, if you're writing pilots in a particular space, whether it's a sci-fi space or horror space or family drama, take a few of the shows that you love that are in the similar lane, break them down, look at their architecture, understand the design of them, because they're designed a certain way for a reason, right? The architecture exists in a certain way for a reason. In addition to watching, reading is incredibly important. Again, it's one of those things, you're in a living, breathing space. To me, not reading scripts is kind of like being a pop singer and not listening to the radio, right? You have to know what's out there. You have to understand what people are listening to, because you're building onto that. A lot of people will complain that they don't have access to scripts. Well, every year, at the end of the year, the blacklist, that is the professional blacklist, not the website, comes out. The blacklist, the list, and this is confusing, and I've explained it, every week, at least a couple of times a week since the site launched in 2012. On the one side, we have the consumer-facing website, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But on the other, we have the blacklist, which is really what the website was born from, which is a website, a list of the most liked screenplays in the industry that are unproduced, that is voted on by industry professionals. So producer, development executives, et cetera, et cetera. For example, a manager can't vote, right? They can promote their client. But that list that comes out at the end of the year is a list of the most liked screenplays, and this is particular to screenplays, in the industry on a given year. And that is just kind of a rundown of 50, 60 scripts that the industry is responding to enough for people who vote for the blacklist to reach out and to recommend it to the blacklist organizers. So it's incredibly important to be familiar with what's happening now. Once in a while, I'll talk to a writer who will say, like, yes, I read scripts, but they're only for movies that were made 20 years ago. While there's a lot to learn from them, and when we're talking about what the industry is doing, we want to get a sense of the flavors that the industry is responding to. Again, you will not like all the scripts. You're not supposed to like all the scripts. This is a subjective conversation. But reading them, becoming familiar with them is incredibly important. There are also pilot repositories online for anybody who is looking for pilots. If you want me to send you links to those, by all means, let me know, email me, and I will get that to you. By the way, I think all of you guys have my email because all of you guys received your Zoom information through my email address. But if you don't, you can always email me at lee@leejessup.com. In addition to watching and reading, obviously there's writing. Writing has to happen. Once in a while, I'll talk to somebody who'll say to me like, yes, I don't have a completed thing, but I'm ready. It doesn't matter whether you think you're ready or not. For the industry, you have to have that great undeniable script, and you have to ultimately make progress with that on an ongoing basis. Now, oftentimes that great undeniable script, 99% of the time, will not be your first script. It may not be your second script, because you are learning your craft, and it's incredibly important to learn how to write the thing. And it takes trial and error, right? The easiest script that you will write will be your first script because you just don't know it well. There are fantastic avenues there for those people who are class prone, who learn better in classes. You absolutely don't have to take a class. Some of my favorite resources are Script Anatomy for TV writing, Jen Grisanti, who's amazing, who is doing a pilot class, I believe, in the fall. She usually doesn't do them in the fall, so look out for that. Pilar Alessandra has amazing classes. Corey Mendel has his 3 workshops. I will send you guys links to all of that in case you're interested. You are not obligated by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just trying to give you resources. Not every writer is a classroom writer. That is perfectly allowed. I can tell you that a lot of my working writers continue to take classes to just keep things fresh, or when they're breaking in a new project. One of my writers that now has an overall deal at FX, who became a teacher at Script Anatomy at some point, when she was already a working writer, quite successful, said to me, yeah, I want to take the job, but do you think I can still take classes there? Because the classes are really important to me. That doesn't mean everybody should take classes. That doesn't mean it's the right thing for you. But know that it's important for you. There also is, we know, a million books, and I'm not going to talk about the Robert McKees of the world and Sid Field. With all the respect and love in the world, everybody knows about them. So I'm going to talk to you about a couple of smaller books, or books that are more recent, in an area that I ultimately feel that writers often gloss over. Writers often seem to bypass pre-work, especially in features, and kind of go straight into pages. Now, it's important to know that outlining in the industry is an important skill to have, because once you become a working writer, whether you sell a pitch to something and are paid to then write the script, or whether you're given an open writing assignment, or whether you're in a writer's room writing on a show, the outline is really where the kind of heavy lifting of the work is going to happen. You may not like doing it for your own process, and that is perfectly allowed. But knowing how to do it if you want to work professionally is incredibly important. If what you're saying is, I'm going to write my own material on spec, by on spec, I mean speculatively, nobody is paying you to write this. It is not commissioned by anybody, and you've not given away the rights to it. If you're writing material only on spec and you don't intend to work with the industry, you don't intend to sell to the industry, because ultimately you can sell a fully written script to the industry and have somebody come back at you and say, okay, great, we want to do a little bit of a re-break on this. We love the story, we love the core story, but we need to re-break some elements. Let's go back to outline. You have to go back to outline unless you want the script taken away from you, which we don't want. So outlining, an important skill in learning how to break story. There are a couple of books. The two books that I wanted to mention to you guys are books that, again, I recommend to my clients all the time, my ongoing coaching clients. They come to deal with pre-work, really thinking about the pieces that you are baking into your TV pilot or your feature script that are incredibly important. And again, the pre-work is where I see a lot of writers kind of try to cut corners and just jump into script and not really have a lot of things figured out, which is why a lot of scripts end up unwritten or partially written, or kind of abandoned around page 55 or 60. So the two books that I really like for TV, I'm a big fan of Cam Miller's The Hero Succeeds, which takes you through a lot of pre-work and specifically to TV with some sort of a grid format, but some of the big picture thinking. And there has to be some big picture thinking in what you're doing, because ultimately you're trying to get a lot of money spent on this, for somebody to buy it, somebody to make it, somebody to get inspired by your skill set to bring you onto their project, if that is something that you're interested in, such as a TV writing job or an open writing assignment. The other book that is more feature driven is Michael Tabb's Pre-Writing Your Screenplay. And I will absolutely send you links to those. So look out for that. But these are the things that I find incredibly helpful when breaking story. Now, once you are developing material, I'm a big fan of getting notes early and often. We call it early and often exposure, just to make sure that everything is as sound as it can be. And we find that, it's easier to re-examine concept and concept. It's easier to re-examine idea and a treatment. It's easier to re-examine architecture and an outline than it is once you're in the pages, and kind of pulling one thing feels like pulling a piece of spaghetti out of a spaghetti bowl. So I'm a big fan of writers groups. I'm a big fan of going to, script pipeline for concept stuff, or Andrew Hilton, send you all the names, don't worry, for a treatment review. Going to writers groups doesn't mean that it has to be paid. There's nothing here that says you have to spend money on any of those things, as long as you're able to get those meaningful notes that will help you move your material forward. You always ideally want to get notes from somebody who is smarter than you about the space. And luckily for all of us, there will always be somebody smarter than us, because those are the people we get to learn from. And so if you're in a writer's group, try to be in a writer's group with people that are writing scripted. Maybe there are a couple of people there that are ahead of you. If, oftentimes I will talk to writers who will say, I'm an emerging writer, but I really want to be part of a writer's group that is made of working writers. Usually, unless you know one of the working writers, that is not going to happen, because they're not going to invite a stranger with lesser experience in. They want to work with people at their own level. But talk to friends, talk to people, see who you can find in order to help you make your material better. I love family notes. I think family notes are great, but at the end of the day, if your mother, sister, brother, husband, father is not in the industry, maybe they have fantastic storytelling instincts and you should absolutely listen to them. If they don't know the space and the expectations as well, they're not going to be as helpful in later stages of development. So I do encourage you to seek out those sources. I know Coverfly, for example, has some peer review things where, you effectively can get reviews from other people that are not by pay. Like, look for those avenues if funds are limited, but certainly build your writing community to help you figure that out. And that can be part of your writers group. That can be somebody you met in a class. That can be somebody that you met at the Austin Film Festival. That can be somebody that anything, anytime, anywhere. Now, all of this comes to the idea that you are a business, right? You are trying to build a business of a writer. And as the business of a writer, you are going to have, two different offerings at heart. You're going to have your products, you're going to have your services. Your products are going to be your scripts that are written on spec, speculatively, be they TV pilots or features. And then you're going to have your services, which are your writing services. Anytime that you are paid to write something, you are providing your writing services, whether you're getting paid to write in a writer's room, whether you get an open writing assignment. And just so we're clear, an open writing assignment can be anything from developing an idea that is held by the production company that they said, come to us, we want to hear your take on it. It can be a page one rewrite on somebody else's script. It can be a dialogue punch up. It can be a book, blog post, podcast adaptation into a screenplay. It can be any number of things. So what is an open writing assignment is far and wide. Today, when somebody is brought in for an assignment or when is brought in to pitch a take for a writing assignment, they will be provided some source material. Source material can be a book. And yes, you are expected to do all that reading in order to come in, pitch your take, and hopefully kind of pitch a good take for the job, get the job. So those are the writing services that you'd be putting out there. It's important to remember, and I have these conversations all the time about the writer's brand, right? Does the writer have to have a brand? Do they have to have a lane to stick to? In my experience, yes. Usually the way that the industry works is that once you have representation, and don't worry, we're going to talk about representation for a little bit as well. I'm already seeing time run away from me. So if it's okay with you guys, we're probably going long. Hope it's okay. So what representation is going to try and do for you when you come in the industry is build your fan base, right? And they're going to build your fan base in a space that is specific to what you make. So if you are a comedy writer, for example, they're going to look to send your script to Gloria Sanchez, right? They're going to, being a company, not a person. Hello Sunshine. There are going to be a slew of companies that they're going to get your material out to who make that content. Now, ultimately, if you write a comedy and then you write a thriller, that fan base is going to have to change entirely. And reps would rather not do that. They don't want to have to introduce you anew and argue your case every single time that you have a new script. So that's where representatives specifically are going to look for you to pick a lane. But the reality is that if you write a fantastic sci-fi drama and you connect with a sci-fi producer, when you write that entirely grounded comedy, they can't do anything with it. So you want to build a fan base and then keep feeding your relationship. And that's where brand comes in, right? That's where knowing your lane is important. There's also the reality of you can't know every genre by heart, right? You can't know every piece of content in every genre. There's a lot of content out there in case nobody noticed. So it's just an important thing to understand your lane, because we talked about reading and watching. You have to read and watch the stuff that is in your lane. I think that one of the more popular questions that I'll get asked in this area is like, well, I'm really a family drama writer, but I hear that horror is always hot. So should I go write a horror movie? My question back to that is always, do you want to be a horror writer? Are you interested in that? Are you interested in knowing everything in the horror space? Because if you're going to meet with an executive who is working for Blumhouse or Monkey Paw and their bread and butter is horror, guess what? They know all the movies. They've seen all the TV shows, they read a bunch of books, they've listened to the podcasts, and they want you to meet them on that level, right? If you're not inherently a horror writer, even if you're able to kind of glom onto one fresh horror idea, if that area doesn't interest you, if you don't want to live in that space, you shouldn't be writing in that space, because you'll be talking to people who are going to be experts, and they're going to expect you in some way, while you don't have the time that they have, to be an expert in the material because you love that space. And truly, I find that it's usually people that love a particular space that manage to break through in it. So it's incredibly important to understand your genre area. Now, on top of all of this, people often feel constrained by the idea of a genre. I can only write X. I feel that there is a little bit of leeway today. I don't encourage you to write a thriller and then write a small family comedy, because those two just don't go hand in hand. But if you're writing a thriller, it can be a sci-fi thriller, it can be a suspense thriller, it can be a psychological thriller. It can even veer into horror if you really wanted to. as long as you know, the horror is grounded, or if it's sci-fi, it can, you know, you can have a device there, but beyond that, the storytelling is entirely grounded. It really is up to you. You can move a little bit, but you want to think about, how do things make sense on the page? There's a writer that I work with who's incredibly prolific and super talented, and came from playwriting. And, you know, at some point, I think I read a couple of smaller family dramas that were great. A horror film, an action film, and a kids movie. And I had to say, like, if I'm a rep looking at your material, I don't know what to do with you. So we need to kind of start defining who you are as a writer on the page. It's just a thing to think about. You don't have to agree with me, sharing with you my information. Now, once the work is done, right, you've gotten a ton of notes. And for the record, like, my working writers get notes. It's not, nobody writes and like, I'm just writing and it's perfect and I'm going to send it on. On the contrary, once you're working, you really feel that, you know, the stakes are high because you have to continue to impress. So for example, my producing partner, who's a high level writer, usually anything that she writes before it goes to agents, managers, to producers, if she's writing on assignment, won't be true for writers' rooms because there's just no space there. Will go to at least 3 or 4 people that are the usual readers, for particular perspectives on the work. And that's not unusual. So having those people that will help you get the material to that level is incredibly important, and something that, for the record, is not just for emerging writers, very much for working writers. But once you've done all of that, you have to start looking at getting your work exposure. It's great that you wrote it, it's amazing, but you didn't write it to put it on the page for me, or to put it on the shelf. For me, getting work out there, submitting to competitions, looking at the various ways to get your work exposure and build a momentum if you're not of the industry. And most writers that are coming in are not going to be of the industry, are going to have very few contacts. Of course, you send it to your contacts first. Once it's vetted, see whether or not there's interest. If there are managers or reps that you've been talking to, great. If you have a rep, clearly it goes to that rep first, and they determine what they can and can't do with it. But then you want to, especially if you're unrepresented, you want to use the work to get exposure, to really get it out there. And for me, getting exposure for the work, be it sending directly to your reps, or sending it to producers that you worked with before that you think this might be up their alley, or people that you have contacts with that, or a connection with, that you haven't worked with before and it's up their alley. Or then looking at competitions, things like the Blacklist website, we'll talk about that in a second, doing online pitches, that's honoring the work, right? Ultimately, if you are not doing that, you are not honoring the work that you've done, the hard work that you've put in. So I think it's just an incredibly important thing to consider as you do this. I see somebody just put their hand up. If you have a question, I see this is Nicholas. I can allow you to talk. So keep that hand up. Sorry, we just moved from GoToMeeting to this, and I'm still figuring it all up. So we're going to have our Q&A in a couple of minutes, but if you guys want to ask questions live, I can allow you to talk. So know that you can do that. If you want to start putting your hands up, you can. If you want me to just answer from the Q&A, we can do that. Put your hands up if you want to have them up. I am always happy to talk to people live. Keep them there. We'll get to that in just a minute. So getting your material exposed is honoring the work, right? If you did the work, you slaved over it, you got the notes, you got the hard breaks, there were some tough notes, they broke your heart, but you plowed through, you pushed through. Getting them out there, getting them exposure is ultimately honoring the work that you did. You want to, I do believe in competitions. Yesterday I had another reminder when one of my clients who has been kind of looking for a path, suddenly got a call that the path is showing up in a competition. So I do think those are important. You don't want to submit to everything. It can get really expensive really fast. There's a handful of great competitions that kind of, they can't guarantee you anything, but tend to be looked at by the industry. There's a smaller sect of other competitions. I will send you after this a blog post about the 50+ competitions, labs, fellowships that I track. But the big ones are, Final Draft, Big Break, Nickel, obviously the one to rule them all for features, script pipeline I love, and they have really been able to find writers and scripts that have then go on to be on top of the blacklist. And by the blacklist, I mean the list and not the website. And I do need to talk about the website. So we're going to get to that in a minute. So they've been able to really harness those scripts that have been able to carve a way in the industry that are not particularly commercial, right? They've had period scripts that went on to do really well, to get representation, to get on top of the blacklist, occasionally even sell, which is not a natural outcome from a competition. We'd all love that, but that it doesn't work as, write the script, win a competition, sell the script. Sell the script is something that actually, in this day and age, doesn't happen a ton on original content. The way that most writers make a living is writing pages, which is why the strike that we're in is happening right now, because providing services for the industry has become a losing battle, which is why writers are striking. And I'm very, as much as I hate the strike, because don't we all, and we want people to be back at work and we want the industry moving forward. At the end of the day, this strike is for the welfare and viability of the screenwriting profession. So sorry, just a moment there, but getting material out there is incredibly important, and getting it to those competitions. If at the end of the day you win a competition and get a rep out of it, I'm thrilled. If you win a competition, go on a bunch of meetings and have a bunch of contacts, I'm thrilled. What I'm looking for in the competitions that you are submitting to is industry potential, right? I can tell you that my producing partner way back then was a working writer, submitted a feature script to Final Draft Big Break, working lower level TV writer, ended up winning the competition, which facilitated and changed in representation, which and kind of opening up the feature space for her, because she was in TV prior, and really kind of made some changes. So I'm a believer in what they can do. I don't think they are a guarantee. There are no guarantees in this business. You have to decide what is the path that is the viable path for you, and that is unique to every client and or every writer. One of the things that I love about this industry is that every writer's path is unique, and the advice there is to ultimately not think that you know how you are going to break in, or how you're going to succeed, or how you're going to build up your representation, right, or your career. It may happen any number of ways. You have to decide what is viable for you and where you want to put your attention. For some people, will be producing their work. I talked to a fantastic writer a few days ago whose script I really responded to, and that writer is obviously a doer. Like, that writer is not going to sit on their hands and wait for somebody to come along to produce their script. This is a writer that has the chops, that has that life experience to say, well, why don't you roll up your sleeves and maybe, look at fundraising, look at putting this together, look at bringing in a producer, take some producing classes. That is the right path for that individual. For another writer, it may be like, script is not getting traction. Let's try a play. Let's try a novel. A lot of my writers are not a lot, but a few of my writers are novelists. I'm not saying you have to go write a novel. I'm not saying you have to do any of those things. All I'm saying is, don't limit yourself to my breaking in story or my career growth story is going to look like X. It may look like Y. It just has to be palatable to you. It has to be something that makes sense for you, because breaking in is difficult. Sustaining a career, as we know from the strike, is challenging. And part of the reason that we are, like I said, striking is to make it more sustainable. Now, for most writers, right, before I get into most writers, the blacklist website, important to talk about, because it is a component of how writers get attention, as well as Roadmap Writer, Stage 32, online pitches. I will send you all that stuff. Virtual Pitch Fest for queries. So all of those things are useful for getting exposure for your work. Blacklist website is the side of the blacklist umbrella that I was talking about earlier with scripts. That is a unique proposition in that you're allowed to post a profile of your work, have your script there for industry downloads, and also pay for evaluations, which, when high enough, because they have access to industry professionals because of the list, and because they're grown from within the industry, they have the ability to then surface the work to industry interested managers. Used to be producers, will be again post-strike, but you can go on that site and pay for evaluations, which again give you a temperature gauge on how the material is doing, and hopefully can help you stimulate some interest, which is what we're looking for. Roadmap writers and Stage 32 really fast offer online pitches, oftentimes, especially now to managers, not producers, for the duration of the producers, just so that we are clear. The WGA advocates absolutely not contacting producing entities, be they AMPTP or otherwise, AMPTP being the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, with any content, because the idea of a strike is deprivation. We are depriving the industry of contact at this moment in order to urge them to come back to the negotiating table and make a deal that is advantageous for the writers out there. So usually the first big step for most emerging writers, it may be a fellowship, and it may be a competition, and maybe that you make things on your own, but if you want to go in a more traditional industry route, it may be looking for representation. And I will just say that, well, two things. One, we're definitely going over. So hope you guys can hang in there with me, and my apologies for cramming all of this in, but I really want to make sure you guys get some good info out of it. But usually, you know, with managers tend to be the first advocate in the industry for the writer. It's not agents first anymore. Agents are really in the outgoing call business or incoming call business. Writer managers are in the outgoing call business. So they will do what they can to kind of build you that fan base to get you out there to advocate for you as meaningfully as possible. And they may want to develop with you. They may want to take something of yours out. All of this is going to be on spec. They're working on spec. Managers should be collecting 10% from you if they're attached as producer to your material. You're not paying them 10% because they can only get paid once on a project. But writers today have been finding managers through personal connections, which are referrals. The easiest, nothing in this industry is easy, but totally doable. Easiest path to representation is referrals. Then we have query letters, online pitches, all of that to help you get out there to find a rep that is compatible with you. Now, what am I looking for in a rep? What makes a rep viable for me when a writer talks to me about them? They have to have some footprint in the industry, right? If they come in from the outside and nobody knows them, they can't help you because nobody knows you either. So in that scenario, they'll be looking for big writers whose team they can get on and establish themselves that way. You want a manager who has a footprint in the industry in development. I recently talked to somebody who said, well, there's the talent manager who wants to sign me. Sorry, we have dogs barking. They will stop in development. So ultimately, we have you guys really in the middle of this. Hey, apologies. So a writer of mine approached me and said, I talked to a talent manager who reps talent who wants to rep me. And the problem with that is that that manager doesn't have a footprint in development. That particular manager has a footprint in talent. And so nobody in development is going to take their call saying, oh my God, Lisa's amazing. She has the most amazing taste. The last thing I read from her got on top of the blacklist, or, you know, was packaged with some amazing talent. So those are things to keep in mind. You want to have somebody who has a footprint, who is known for their taste level, and who's ready to hustle. If you get in with, you know, Alan Gasmer, amazing storied manager, but Alan's been around for a long time. I don't know that he wants to make 70,000 calls for you to break you in because he loves your stuff. So you want to look at that. Managers will traditionally look to either get an existing script out because they think that it's viable for the industry, and they may give you some notes, and they may want to do some more development about it before it goes out, or they will look to develop something new with you. They may come in and say, you know, I love your voice, but this is not viable for the industry right now. I'd love to develop something new with you, in which case you're then invited to send them log lines and to have conversations about what is that next thing that you are going to develop with them. You're going to, you know, pick a log line, write a treatment, go to outline, and get material that then they are invested in and they want to get out for you. All right. Once you are broken in, once you have that manager, Then you're going to be looking to go into generals. Generals are really kind of where the industry road begins for most. Generals are general meeting in which the writer meets the industry, where a fan base gets built. And from there, the hope is that a fan base will be built of people that will be super excited about you, and who will want to read your next thing and will want to hear your pitch on their project. You know, they may be people that can produce your material, in which case you'll be going into for a development meeting, and there will be conversations about packaging. Packaging material is all about bringing added value elements to your material. So a high profile director, a high profile cast, things that can help elements come together for a package, because a lot of reps feel that in order to take something out, they want a package on it, which makes the buying of the material easier. It facilitates more of that. It used to be the producers did the packaging. Today, we find that oftentimes that is put on managers and agents, and studios and buyers often want to see material fully packaged before they make the commitment. Now, that said, that is not on you. That is going to be on your rep. You don't have to worry about how to bring in those elements unless they are your friends. But in that case, you always want to make sure that the attachments are true attachments rather than casting. So that the attachment has value in the marketplace, in that their name is known, not just their face. You know, we look at it as a difference, the differences between attachments and casting, right? When there's somebody you're like, I saw them in something once, I'm not really sure where, but yeah, I know the face, that's casting. If you see somebody's picture on a poster, you can go, oh, I know exactly who that is. That is an attachment, that is a value element. But again, that is not for you to worry about, just something that the people working with you will look to help with on your work as it gets out there. All right, I've talked way too long, so I'm going to start opening up for questions. I'm going to go down the line, answer quickly, and also go into the raised hands. So if anybody else, I see I already have 3. If there are more questions, by all means, put them up and stay with me as long as you feel like it. You're under no obligation. Megan asks, what makes you feel that emotional resonance? And that's a hard thing to define, right? Because we all want an emotionally evocative script. But that's where you write and give it to friends and people in your writers group and quiz them. What did you feel? When did you feel it? Did you connect with that emotion? Did you not connect with this one? Where do I have to hit it harder? And that is an iterative process, because what lands for you on the page, you know what you're going for. And therefore, you may need very little guidance to get there. Somebody who's reading it doesn't know the material may need more of that information in order to get the emotion that you're trying to affect onto them. So it is difficult, but it's usually a trial and error thing. Evelyn asked, what kind of emotional experience can succeed with the audience? Is there a popular or high rating for that experience? So I don't know if I'm way dating myself here, but bear with me. I don't know how many of you guys remember Robert Altman's The Player. Fantastic film satirizing Hollywood that talks about, it follows Tim Robbins as a studio executive and talks about, you know, audiences like up endings. And the writer asks, what do you mean up? So, well, happy as opposed to sad, up as opposed to down. I don't think that everything has to have an up ending. I mean, in fact, you know, I went to watch, oh my God, Hilary Swank movie, Boxer. You guys will figure it out. $1 Million Baby. A million years ago, and I couldn't leave the theater because I was sobbing so much. Like my husband, my parents all walked out. I was like still there when the lights turned on because I was just a mess. It was a very powerful experience. I'm still talking about it today. We'll never see that movie again because it broke my heart. Granted, it's much easier in a movie than it is in a script, but I'm looking to feel emotionally engaged in the material. I'm looking for it to not just be a cerebral exercise, but to feel for the characters, to spend time with them, to see them on a human level, right? And it really is about, right? Ask your friends, what it make you feel. Lyndall asked, do short screenplays have a place in your process and requirements? I've gotten some industry attention via competitions with 3 scripts. I'm now raising funds to put Hounded on film in fall, a passion project. I'm a faith-based writer who avoids cheesy and predictable stories. So if you're making a short, usually shorts are considered to be a director's vehicle, or you can make a proof of concept. For representation in the industry, unless you're further on in your career, we are looking for long form scripts. So that pilot, that screenplay, shorts don't have as much of an impact and therefore are not valued as much in the writer's body of work. You become industry viable for most. There are people that will look at the one script, especially if you're going directly to producers, who can say, I want to make it, I don't want to make it, I don't really care about your body of work. But when we talk about the body of work for the industry, we're talking about 2 to 3 scripts in the same or similar space. And that's the genre space. They can be both features and pilots today. But we are looking at long form. We're not doing as much TV specs, so specs for existing shows, spec episodes. So you're looking at original pilots, original screenplays. Joanne had a question. What do you think about writing the same story simultaneously as script, novel, short story? I would say, for the sake of efficiency, pick the format that best suits the story. Unless your plan is to write it as a novel first, try to get it published, have IP in place, and then come back with the scripted format. But really write it in the format that best suits it. Megan asks, Blacklist is great for features. What's the equivalent for pilots? Unfortunately, we don't have a list for pilots, which actually speaks a lot to the differences between the two spaces. So I find that the feature space is really largely populated by, insane people that want to make movies. And my father was a movie producer for many years, and I've worked movies. So, there are plenty of us around. But it's more of a fan space, right? And that's where everybody reads the Blacklist scripts. Pilots don't have the same platform, because ultimately TV is just more corporate, right? You read material because it meets the mandates of your company, what you're trying to buy, what you're trying to develop, or the writer has shown something on the page that is what you're trying to get into a room. So we don't have those lists that are like smaller lists, like the A list and the bitch list that are voted on, but not at the level. There's the Latinx list. There's a few of them around, but none of them at the level of the Blacklist where everybody reads them. I mean, that's why I have a Dropbox. Laura asked, and after this, I'm going to go to a live question. If you are not living in the USA, where and to who do we need to send our scripts? Same thing. Ultimately, some competitions will not take international submissions, so you do want to look at that. But websites like Roadmap Writers, Stage 32, that allow you to do online pitches really don't discriminate based on geography. I find that if you want to be a TV writer, you're going to have to figure out your way to LA. If you're writing features, you absolutely don't have to. And then it's about finding the producers and the managers that work in this space, as long as you're writing for American sensibilities, right? I'll talk to writers sometimes who will say, I'm in Norway and I wrote a pilot that is set in the UK and I need a US producer. US producers are not going to be as keen for non-US based content unless you have a US protagonist, or unless it is a passion project that they connect to. All right, I'm going to ask Victor to come up. Victor, I just gave you permission to talk. Who knew? It's magic. Let's see. I'm unmuting you. Let's see if I have you. You're still mute. Victor, do I have you? It shows me that you are unmuted now. Victor, I am not getting you. Let's see if I promote you. Does that help? I am not getting your audio at all. I'm so sorry. So let's keep going down the list, or, let's try with Jill and see if Jill will talk to me. Let's see. Jill, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Magic. How are you, Jill?
I'm very well, and yourself?
I'm very good, thank you. What question do you have for me?
Well, I had a couple. One is I am in the WGA. I do have an agent, although he's more of an actor's agent than a writer's agent. Mm-hmm. But I optioned a novel and wrote a screenplay, but I can't, because it's an adaptation, I can't enter it in what I call the good competitions like Final Draft, Page,
The
Nichols.
Nickel. Yep.
And even though I have the option, I have it written and signed, and it's current. And I've gone into other competitions. I've been semi-finalist. I've been a finalist in the Santa Barbara International Awards. The Los Angeles International was semi-finalist. But I've had no gains from those whatsoever. What competitions, or what can you suggest I do? And of course, I can't do too much whilst we're on strike, but going forward, and I can research at least, what would you suggest I do? Because this is a really, really good screenplay, very emotional, character-driven, based in the 1930s. So it's a period piece. I know it's not the genres that they're all looking for summer blockbuster, but it is a wonderful character-driven screenplay.
I mean, you are represented, so I would start putting together a list of producers that you can ask your rep to take the material out to once the strike is over. If your rep is not doing that work, and some of them are stretched too thin, you certainly can make a list of producers to whom that work would be viable who are making similar projects. So I would look to do that, because original material is really the bread and butter of competitions, and usually breaking in is all about original. You obviously have had some traction already. So this is where you want to use your rep. And if he needs the information put together for him, let him know, here are the top 10 producers that I think would be right for it. Is there any way to get it there? Do you need me to put together a, like a one-pager on it so that you can send it to them if they're interested in looking? That's the way that I would approach it.
Okay, thank you. And also, if you could quickly answer, I am 76. I was a documentary producer for years and turned my hand to screenplay writing about 5 years ago. So I have about 3 screenplays completed, and I have 2 that are synopses. Is there I feel like I've reached out to a lot of people and I don't get read directly. And is ageism still rampant in Hollywood?
There is ageism, but ultimately, if you're just reaching out to them over email, what I love about features is that the work is on the page. If they love it, they should read it. And they don't necessarily know your age, not that you should be hiding your age. There is ageism in Hollywood, but that's where having an agent can come in handy. Because I was just talking to somebody about it, that with older writers, we want to focus on producers and getting material set up more than we do on finding representation, because representation looks at that more in terms of what is the runway for a particular runway, and is there, do you still want to be doing this in 5 years or 10 years, or do you want to be focusing on your family and retirement and all of that? So I would keep focus on producers.
Yeah. Okay. I have done pitch decks whilst I'm waiting for the strike to end. Are pitch decks a good thing to give to the agent to send to people?
If he is open to it, then yes. But I do want to make sure that we get to other
Sure.
people as well. So let's go to our next question. Thank you for that, Jill. We have a question from an anonymous attendee. If I have a film script that could work as an American-European co-production due to its plot, can I discuss it with you, or do you have other agents I could contact? I'm not an agent, so let's just keep that in mind. And yes, I mean, I certainly discuss strategy for every project with my clients as it's ready to go. There was a question from Alexander: how do scripts get recommended to the blacklist? The answer to that is there's a list of roughly 300 development executives and producers that get pulled for that list. So there's a kind of a vetted list of people that have been in the industry, known to the industry, that vote on those scripts that make it onto the blacklist, the list. Terry asked a question: is an outline the same as treatment? And thank you for asking that, because I find that a lot of people don't know, but kind of try to do it. There are different things. A treatment is written in prose. It is a story. It's much more jazz handy. There's a lot more kind of not selling in that, but much more of like looking at the flashy elements of the material, and tracking the story in prose, story, character, all of those things in a prose format. On the professional side, I've seen treatments go up to 25, 30 pages. When you're writing your treatment, you certainly don't need to, but you want to make sure that we're tracking the kind of the big moves of the story, character beats, et cetera, et cetera. Outline is going to be like rough, tough, and dirty architecture. It is going to be a scene by scene breakdown of how the story moves and how each scene moves the story or stories, right? ABC story forward, in terms of what is happening in that scene. So it's going to be a much more architectural document that helps you identify how this thing is built, what to expect. First act, second act, third act. If you're in features, you can break it third act or second act into 2A, 2B. Could be writing in sequences. It's totally up to you. TV structure will be figured out in there as well. So they are quite different in essence. Let's see. Let's bring Ron up. Ron, I'm going to allow you to speak. So if you can unmute, that would be great. I asked to unmute. Let's see if it works. Let's see if I can get you over here.
I have unmuted. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. Hello, Ron.
Hello, and thank you very much for doing this. It's
Oh,
very
of course,
helpful.
my pleasure.
And maybe you could just direct me to a site where I can find out more information. There are so many, I'm an avid listener of audiobooks. And I find that so many of these have those qualities of wonderful character, wonderful dialogue already written, and just great content as far as the entire story. They would lend themselves to wonderful screenplays. However, I know there's a process that you go through to get an option to be able to write that, but it seems like sometimes people say, oh, yeah. Would you suggest that maybe one can go in and write a treatment, write a screenplay, then approach the novelist or the publishing company and say, this is an idea that I have. Would you be willing to work with me on this? What would be the real process of doing that?
The real process would be securing the rights to that IP, to that intellectual property first before you put in the work, because as we know, writing something can take a very long time. And
Yes.
so you don't want to put in all that work only to then find out that somebody else already owns the IP, that somebody in the family of the author is developing that script. So traditionally, you want to go to the publisher first. If a book is older and has been on the market for some time and has not been adapted, then it's more likely that the rights are available. Of course, rights are difficult to find. Usually the path is through the publisher if they're accessible, or if you can find the author online. I would get the rights first before you put in the hard work, just because you want to make sure that you are able to then do something with the script. But as Jill just mentioned, it's harder with material that is based on IP. To submit to competitions, to things like that, because the question with IP is ultimately who came up with all of this, right? What is the screenwriter's contribution to this versus what are the pieces that were already there for the writer to play with, and they just organized it well in a screenplay. So I hope that helps.
It does indeed. Thank you.
All right, fantastic. Next up, I'm going to bring up Alexander. Alexander, I'm allowing you to talk. Hopefully you can unmute on your end.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you great.
Okay, that's me. First of all, I want to thank you for these sessions. You're a great teacher, and I've been teaching myself for years, and I can recognize one. And someday I'll have to figure out if I can afford you. But the question I have written several screenplays, and they place pretty well in competitions. And recently I'm trying to pitch the screenplay based on a story from current situation in Ukraine. So it's a war, it's a war piece. And interestingly enough, it was requested by several, I'm only contacting now managers because of the strike. And I just don't get a response after even they request the piece, even though it's won the best war picture on Oxford Scripts, I'm getting no answers. I mean, either way, nice piece, but it's not for me, or
generally people in the industry don't respond unless there is something that they want to say particular to it. War pieces are difficult, they cost more money, and ultimately have a smaller audience, which makes the kind of the business paradigm a little bit more challenging. But I would continue to find more people to send it to. If you're getting requests for the material, ultimately we know that your query is resonating, which is great. So I would just keep going, but also look at more contemporary material and see if that does something for you. I mean, interestingly, as much as, you know, I myself love period pieces, and a lot of writers have period pieces, it is harder to get traction on anything that's period, anything that's war. I know this is not like necessarily period dealing with the Ukraine, but it feels like another time, another place. The challenge that we have in the world that we live in is that it's just gotten significantly more depressing. And so we tend to make less movies about the things that are facing us in our day-to-day life. It was an interesting exploration during COVID, right? How many COVID movies are we going to see after this? And surprise, surprise, we haven't. Because the feeling of the audience, or the kind of the sample, the audience sample that was examined for it, got the sense, or gave the industry the sense of like, we've had enough of this, we don't want more. You know, but if you're getting requests for the script, keep getting it out. Look for social justice producers, people that would be inspired to make this kind of film. It's not going to be easy, but it's definitely worth the fight if you feel really passionate about it.
Yeah, quick follow-up is that what's the etiquette of following up? I mean, I don't want to pester people, but still I would like to see, you know, they were interested to read. I would love to get some sort of response. I mean, it's even negative, as you mentioned before, even negative response is a response that is useful.
Absolutely. Now, listen, unfortunately, oftentimes when you don't hear anything, it may mean that they never actually read the material. Everybody in this industry is stretched way too thin. And what that means is that you do want to follow up once or twice, right? You don't want to do it too much, but you send the script in, you haven't heard for a few weeks, you can reach back out and say, hey, just wanted to confirm that you received the material. And then you can give it 2 or 3 more weeks, maybe 4 weeks, and check in and just say, hey, I know you're really busy. I don't mean to pester you. I'm just doing my due diligence and following up. Wanted to see if you had a chance to read the material. If after that they're still not reading and responding, they probably deprioritize the material in their stack of material, and for whatever reason that is not personal to you in any way, shape, or form, just had to prioritize other material that took priority.
Yeah, so I know you need to move on, but if I'm like most of our writers, I'm starved for personal contact. If I request a conversation, is this out of line?
It is they're not going to give you a conversation unless they read your script and loved it. And then they'll reach out to you to say, let's set up time to talk. I want to hear more about you.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to your other presentations because they leave me both encouraged and depressed. But,
well, hopefully more encouraged than depressed. Listen, thank you for giving me the opportunity to actually say this, well, and first of all, thank you for participating in all of this, because this is for you guys, and the reception has been amazing. Started these in April just to see how it goes, and the reception has just been out of this world. But I think it's really important that I know it's difficult, and it is difficult. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But I can tell you that my job is a really happy job, and my heart is with writers breaking in, always has been, people building careers, always has been. And I've seen so many writers get to build careers and go from 0 to 60 in whatever amount of time it takes, but it is very much possible. It's just consistency, hard work, focus, determination, industry knowledge, community, all of those things are integral, but it is very much possible. I have a very happy job. When I started doing this a million years ago, nobody knew me from Adam, right? Now I have the privilege of telling people like you that I'm doing talk, and a bunch of people show up, which is amazing. But the reason I have a very happy job is because I've had the luxury and the privilege of supporting people on their journeys as they were coming up. And now that's why I get the A-listers and the showrunners who, who've heard about me from their friends. But it's a very happy job, and people do break in all the time. All right, we have our next question. How do I find someone to pay to edit my script? How much is a standard charge? The answer to that to that is that I don't ultimately know, because most writers do their stuff, but you can get proofreaders. Screenplay Mechanic, whose link I will send to you, does have a proofreading service. I believe Final Draft has some of those available as well. If you're looking for somebody to proofread them, there are definitely options out there. Let's see. Then we have a question from Billy. How does the writer's strike affect any jobs I might want to get? If you're looking to get writing jobs, they are non-existent right now, especially if you want to be in the guild at some point. A lot of companies have had hiring freezes to wait and see how this shakes out and what the strike costs for everybody. So this is not a great moment to go looking for writing jobs or jobs in the industry, but a lot of us would like to believe that we are, hopefully, fingers crossed, about halfway through the strike, if not a little bit more, maybe hopefully. So hopefully at some point we'll just look up and it'll all be over, and then there'll be opportunity again. And the thing is with the strike, and what a lot of my writers and I end up talking about, is just what do you want to be on when we arrive on the other end of this, right? What do you want to have? What do you want to have accomplished? This is a unique time in that it allows for just less pressure of, oh my God, what should I be doing? It's also a great time with managers, because managers, usually are very busy with their writers, with their working writers, and getting writers out there, and meeting with studio execs, and taking meetings all over town. Right now, that's unavailable. So a lot of managers are reading writers again in a way that they hadn't been for a long time leading up to the strike, because they're all looking to figure out how to, sustain over this strike period. But I think that that's something that is definitely open to writers now, especially unrepresented writer, in a way that it wasn't prior to the strike. Dennis asked, I'm creating a portfolio of 3 or 4 samples from finished scripts to attract a manager or agent. Should I represent opening, middle, or closing scenes as the samples, or what do you suggest? Ultimately, we're looking for completed scripts, so nobody will want to see just a sample. It's a complete story and how you get us from A to B to C. So I would find your lead script, what you think is your strongest script, and try to get it out there to managers, because we usually go managers first. Usually it's a manager who then makes the introduction to an agent, not the other way around. Agents tend to come into play a little bit later. So I would start with getting something out to a manager that is a completed script, and figure out what is your best lead script there. Let's see. Billy asked, could I retrofit an outline to my existing screenplay? I don't use Final Draft or any of those other apps. I do think it's really important to use screenwriting software, whether you're using Final Draft, which is the industry standard, or Celtics or Celtics, or whatever other options, creative screenwriting software. There are options out there. Formatting is very important, because people like me open a script and we can tell, because we read all the time, we can tell instantly if something's like a millimeter off. But yeah, you should, there is an exercise to be done about, if you have an outline before, take an existing script and just go through it and break it down into an outline to see the architecture of it. All right, I'm going to ask Willie to come on up. Willie has a question. I just asked to unmute. Willie, do I have you? I think I don't know what's happening here. Willie, do I have you, Willie?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. Hi, Willie.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. What I'm curious about to know is, I'm trying to figure out the perfect balance between description and not over describing. Can you give me any type of suggestions or advice so that I could have a little bit more clarity on the boundaries of when I'm pressing into over describing?
So first of all, in your action lines, never put anything we can't see on screen unless it's a character detailing their introductions. So don't tell me what they're thinking. Don't tell me what they're feeling. Don't tell me what past experience is informing the moment. You want to really take us, with as much economy as possible through the critical things that we have to see for the scene to work. But all that said, I would say, email me later. I'll share the blacklist scripts with you and look at how action lines are written in a way that is economized and industry accepted, because that's where learning from reading is incredibly important.
Okay, my last question. Do you believe that, or would you agree, for historical drama, or maybe even better titled as a religious drama, would it still be necessary to minimize dialogue?
You never want to minimize dialogue. I mean, dialogue is dialogue. You want it to be efficient, but in every script, we discover character through action and dialogue. So I wouldn't minimize it. Be sure to really kind of think about how your character speaks and what do they say? What do they not say? What is the subtext? For people that are examining dialogue, David Mamet is a great guy to read, because that guy writes all in subtext. His characters say 3 words and a paragraph worth of information about them. Watch things like The Affair, that was written by a lot of playwrights, tons of subtext built into that. So I wouldn't say minimize dialogue in any of those genres, because while you don't want to over expound and have scenes where we have 2 characters going, hi, how are you? How's your day? Okay, let's get to the meat of the scene now. We find out character and we find out story through dialogue oftentimes. So while we want to show, not tell as much as possible, dialogue is critical to a good script.
Okay. Last thing I just want to know, I read something on your site where you were speaking about now it's a good time to try to find an agent, since the strike is going on and agents don't really have too much to do. They're more inclined to reading scripts at this moment. Do you have any advisement on how I could find
I actually have all that
agent?
in my blogs, so I'm not going to dig in because we've already done a bunch of questions, and it's managers. So it's just the stuff I was talking about right before about managers going to managers. So I will definitely include some links in the post-event email that I sent to you guys. But because we already talked about it a little bit, managers, and yes, it is still a good time.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Willie.
All right, have a good day.
You too. Stephanie asked, so managers get 10%, had one tell me 15% is 10% on average, but some managers have different. All managers should be 10%. We see a push on occasion by a management company to get a little bit more. The funny thing is that years ago, I had gone on record, I think in a blog post, about a particular management company that was taking 15%, and I got a call from a manager in that company saying, please don't put this in writing. You're going to cost my company business. And my thing was like, but you are charging 15%, which is really not where management should be. It should be 10%. The only scenario where I become more comfortable with 15, if 15 comes up, is if the writer is refusing an agent, or if the writer, kind of saying, okay, my manager who gets 10% is going to do everything for me. Why do I need to pay another 10% to somebody else? In that scenario, if a manager comes in and says, listen, as long as I'm working as manager and agent, I'm going to take 15%. I would like us to bring an agent onto your team at some point. But ultimately I would, stick to 10%. And if they're asking for more, then, make sure that you really look at them and consider why, and ask them about it. Most everybody's taking 10%. Why are you asking for 15? Why does that have to happen? How is that affected when I get an agent? Because the idea is that an agent, manager, and lawyer, 10%, 10%, 5%, comes up to 25% altogether. And when you are fully repped and you have a team, you should have an agent, manager, lawyer. You don't want to be in a situation where suddenly agent, manager, and lawyer means that you are now paying 30%, because you're also paying taxes on that money. So if you look at 30% to your team, 30% to taxes, you end up holding 40% of the money. I find that to be slightly less appetizing than 50% of your money, which is still a lot. So I hope that answered. Joe asked about the books that I recommended. I will send you guys links to that. So just hang tight. That's going to be coming your way. Caroline said, I'm sorry for the long question. I don't know if I've lucked out, but I have just written my first horror movie and started a production company. I have brought on an NIP, and he says there are 2 studios interested. I was wondering, 1, what should I sell my script for? And 2, what percentage would be expected on the back end of the box office? I would talk to an entertainment lawyer who would help you determine what you can do. So I would look for an entertainment lawyer to negotiate. It's hard to say because if you're not a WGA member, we don't have WGA standards. I would not try to sell it right now because we are in the middle of a strike. So deals are frowned upon, but you can certainly do the prep work by finding an entertainment lawyer and looking at what is viable based on the cost of the film. Obviously, if it's a low budget feature, you're going to, in non-strike time, get less money than a big budget feature. But ultimately that's what you want to look at based on budget, based on buyer. In a perfect world, we want to see the writer get paid somewhere between 2 and 4% of the budget, or 2.5%, 5%. Back end is a little bit more dodgy. Very few people actually see back end. So I hope that answers it. Sorry that I'm talking quickly. I'm just trying to get everybody in. There's somebody named Philman, THILLMON, that I would love to bring up. So I just gave you speaking permissions, which I feel so powerful.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Hi. Thank you for your time. This is Tyrese. I just want to know, are you open to receiving emails from us for various questions? Is that a lot? Or I know you also, you said you have some clients, and how do you go about, having you, or how do you go about working with someone like you?
So I do have clients. My bread and butter is spending my time talking to writers all day, every day. I do have writers that I coach. At any one time, I work between 125, 150 writers. Many of them in non-strike times are going to be working writers, so I'm not going to be as busy with them on the day-to-day. But yeah, if you have questions, if you want to explore more, working with me is a great option. Unfortunately, because we had 300 people online today, I can't take questions over email from everybody as much as I would love to, because my husband would kill me, and I totally would. That's the problem. When I was talking to somebody yesterday, I was like, or 2 days ago, I was like, I don't have a hobby. Like, I love my job. So if working with me is of interest, you guys are actually going to get a discount code in the email from this talk. You can sign up online. You're not obligated to do anything but the intake session, which is kind of my foundational session, in which I just try to learn more about your situation and advise you on what those next steps could be. A lot of writers end up going into ongoing coaching with me. It's all on the website. I don't want to waste your time with all of that, but yeah, there's one-time coaching, there's ongoing coaching. It's entirely up to you. And what's fun about my job is that every writer is different. So my job ends up being a little bit different with everybody.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. That answered my question. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you. All right, Billy asked, does getting a couple of quarterfinalist designation mean anything, or do they just give this to everybody who enters? So they don't give it to everybody who enters. And I think that it should mean something to you, that your material is starting to rise. In order for it to mean something for the industry, we want it to rise further, right? We are looking for those semifinalists, finalists, usually designation winner circle for the big competitions. But if your material is starting to surface, and not everybody will like it. If you put your script in one competition or 2 competitions and didn't surface, that is not a verdict. That is a small sample. So don't make determinations on that. But what it should tell you once you start making the quarters is that it is cutting through some of the noise, right? We want it to keep surfacing, but ultimately it's a start, and it's something that as you get started, you should absolutely celebrate. For example, I think this script pipeline, this is all fresh in my head because I just talked to Matt, who runs it 2 nights ago. I believe their quarters were like top 75 scripts. That's huge. For Nickel, semifinalist is top 150 scripts of however many thousands they get every year. Quarterfinals is like 250. So it should mean something to you for starters, and is very important, and is the reason that some writers will go for smaller competitions first. But for the industry, it's not quite going to do it yet. All right, next question. And I fear that there's like 68 more questions here. So we're not going to be able to get to all of them, but I'm going to give it 10 more minutes to get to as much as I can. Let's see. We have, who do we have next here? And there goes my voice. So that's always fun. Richard. Hey, Richard. I'm going to allow you to talk. This power is unhealthy, guys. I mean, it's really.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you great.
Okay. You know me, I took some coaching with you, right?
Yep.
Okay. I have a general question about something that is a little bit, well, it seems like conflicting information in a way. Not from you, I mean, but from the industry. So when you had Jeff Portnoy on a month or so ago, he talked about the distinction between two kinds of writing for the industry vis-a-vis writing for the audience, right? Mm-hmm. And that people in the industry are thinking writing up, more sophisticated, and writing for the audience very often entails writing down. Okay, that being said, it's interesting to me that when we talk about sending out a log line to a manager or trying to convince people to get interested in a basic concept, that it seems to me that there's a contradiction here. That, in other words, that agents, managers seem to be responding more to material that they think they can sell easier rather than it necessarily being more sophisticated material. Now, maybe I've misunderstood something, but it's a little puzzling to me. I don't know if this makes sense, what I'm saying, but.
Listen, I understand what you're talking about. I wouldn't say the writing script for the industry is about dumbing down the material in any way, shape, or form. I find that the material that moves and sells is, kind of a 90s determination, just because we're not selling as much. But you have to write for the executive audience, because that is your audience when you are starting out, right? So oftentimes writers will break on smaller films that are uniquely voiced and then be brought onto those bigger projects that are studio, that are meant for a wider audience. Right. So that's where knowing the industry and looking at the blacklist and things like that just becomes incredibly important.
Right. Okay, but it does mean that, the script that I spoke to you about, which is, I won't get into, was in the finals of the big break. I got into the final draft, big break. Right.
I worked with somebody who won the nickel.
Okay.
Which on a lovely small film about, a restaurant in a small town, not in the United States. And a lovely little script, but it's not, in terms of concept, the writing was fantastic. The concept wasn't particularly sticky. I mean, I worked with somebody who was a nickel finalist who wrote a fantastic Japanese internment camp script that was really powerful, right. But didn't ultimately get the traction that he wanted because the industry wasn't looking for that type of script. On the flip side of it, I worked with somebody who won Final Draft years ago, who won on, and the category, not the whole thing, but won on basically a Fast and Furious script, and was really frustrated that he couldn't get it out there. But the take was, we already have a Fast and Furious script. So right. It is about looking at what's out there and thinking about what is your unique story. And we always look at it as like, what is the story that only you can tell? How do you connect to the material? I know you're working on that, so I love that.
Right. Right.
But that's where we're looking at for those type of stories.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
All right, a few more questions down here, and I'm going to bring more people on, so hang in there. I think we're going to go into like 11:40 if you guys bear with me. And then and I'm going to apologize and feel bad and lose sleep about everybody else whose question I didn't get to, but I'm doing my best. There was a question about, can we send the script directly to Netflix or Amazon? No. Netflix, Amazon in non-strike time. Again, they receive material through, they don't receive any unsolicited material, which means that the material that they receive will usually be through agents, managers, other producers, colleagues. So unfortunately, you can't do that. Cara said, regarding the strike, an LA producer friend of mine just personally connected me with an exec at Hallmark and Lifetime, something I've been patiently waiting for years. From my understanding, however, due to the strike, even as a non-union member, I should not move this forward at all. For example, I should not even agree to getting to know you meeting correct. Any advice, I would be so grateful for any guidance on what to appropriately do. So you are correct in that the industry is, and WGA is specifically mandating and dictating that writers do not approach producers. If I were you, I would ask for that introduction. I would reach out to that individual and say, thank you so much for your interest. Would it be okay for us to connect just as soon as the strike is over? You can absolutely do that. There's nothing wrong with doing that. At the end of the day, you can't stop. Like, if your best friend is a producer and you guys are sitting around talking, there's nothing that says that you can't do that. But ultimately, and based on WGA standards, you should not be approaching any companies about new material. I would ask for the connection and then reach out and say, let's connect post-strike. Strike ends, you give it a week, you give it 10 days, and then you reach out and see if you can restart those conversations. All right, I'm going to ask Karen to come on board. Karen, if you could, I've asked you to unmute. If you could unmute, that would be amazing.
Yes, definitely. I just have two real quick questions.
Please.
What is the format for securing the rights? I have a screenplay about a book. It's inspired by a book, which actually I was the content editor of. Is there a format?
If you're the content editor on it, you probably know the publisher. Start talking to the publisher, see whether or not the book rights are available. If the book rights are available and you were involved, I would write a love letter to the author and see how they respond to it.
We're friends, so that's okay. What kind of letter does he have? I mean, what kind of legalese does he have to put in?
That's where you want to involve an IP lawyer who will help you contract the thing.
Okay, very good. The other quick question is, there is a source for a reputable grant writer in the mental health industry is really what I'm looking for this project. How do you find?
I wouldn't know where to tell you. I would probably start looking at something like ISA Networks and seeing if they have something.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I wouldn't know. I'm sorry. Larissa had a question. How do you know if a manager has a footprint in development? The blacklist is a great way to look at people, because obviously those scripts that have representation on them have gotten in through a manager who's there. Look their name up in Deadline or in the Hollywood Reporter. Look at their social media. Look at, are they associated with any scripts? Look at their client list. IMDb will often have their client list on. So start looking at who they are representing. If there's nobody on their list, it's probably a problem. So I hope that helps. Let's see. Let's bring up Anthony. Anthony, I'm going to allow you to talk.
Hello, thank you. Am I coming okay?
Yeah, you're coming in great.
Awesome. Apologies, I stepped away, so apologies if you answered this already in the presentation. How quickly, when you're reading a script, do you know that this script, how quickly within that script are you?
Am I engaged?
Yeah, exactly.
Usually, like strong writing, I know it within a page, 2 pages, 3 pages. The material may end up having some flaws, but I know whether or not the writer has really engaged me within 3 to 5 pages.
Awesome.
And that's where I like things like script pipelines, like first 30 evaluation, things like that, because we know that executives have gone on record saying, if I don't know within the first whatever, in the teaser, and if it's a pilot, or within the first 5 pages, I'm putting it down. I don't put it down because my job is not to put it down. And even when, in a development capacity, I tend to read the whole way through just because I want to see where it's going, unless, for whatever reason, I find the material to just not, if I'm not getting the story, if I'm finding it to be a lot of work that's not yielding me a clear understanding, then I will talk to the writer about it. But I think you usually know when you're in capable hands of a storyteller very quickly. And then it's a question of how does the story hold up? But the idea is that writers will have multiple stories to tell. And so the first thing we look for is good writing. And then we look for a great script from that good writer.
Thank you. Appreciate you. Have a great weekend.
You got it. I'm going to ask Maddie to talk. I think it's going to have to be our last live question. So Maddie, do I have you?
IP lawyer.
Hello?
Hello.
Hi, can you hear
Hi,
me?
Maddie. I can hear you great.
Okay, thank you so much, Lee. This is amazing. I really appreciate it. I wanted to talk to you and see if I can have a further conversation with you. I have a half-hour multicam family comedy, and I wrote it, directed, and produced it. And I did a proof of concept. I have a pitch deck and all the fun stuff, but I want to make sure that I have everything in place before I take it out into the marketplace. And I wanted to know if you also felt that that was something that was that multi-camera is, is a viable thing right now, or if it's something that's kind of sitting on the shelf.
Listen, we're not doing a ton of multicams when we are making TV. We haven't seen what the fall season
How
looks like.
much might an IP lawyer
Because
charge?
I think we have somebody's mic on.
If you're looking for experienced patent
But whoever is,
hourly rates to be somewhere between $275.
somebody's talking in the background.
Areas outside major.
So ultimately, multicams are a thing. For me to assess where it lands in the industry and whatnot, I would have to do an intake and really get to know the material. So yeah, they are viable. We know that there's, probably a dozen multicams that are going one time. They're not as popular as they used to be.
Yes.
They are out there.
Okay, great. Okay, well, I will just, is there anything I need to do, or it's just email you?
You can sign up through my site. You guys get a discount code, so I will get that out to you. That will be coming in on email today.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I have a big apology to everybody whose questions I did not get to. I know there are many, and I apologize, and I do feel badly about it, but we're going about 40 minutes over. So I hope you guys will forgive me. I will have another one of these either the end of August or in the middle of September. I'm still just waiting to see some family travel things, and then I'll figure it out. But I really want to thank you guys for being here with me, for taking the time, for putting in your questions, for sitting through all of this. The fact that you allow me to do this, that you give me the space to do this and to speak about something that I love, and doing what I love, which is supporting writers, is incredibly meaningful for me. So thank you again. I hope everybody has a fantastic weekend. Look out for that email, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Bye.